I personally felt he could have reached a decision.
In your view, he could have reached a conclusion.
Right, he could have reached a conclusion.
Well, I mean, he seemed to suggest yesterday that there was another venue for this, and that was Congress.
Well, I'm not sure what he was suggesting, but, the Department of Justice doesn't use our powers of investigating crimes as an adjunct to Congress.
That is the Attorney General Bill Barr earlier today on CBS saying he believes Bob Mueller could have made a call, or should, a call on whether or not there was a crime, and did not. California Congressman Devin Nunes, ranking member of the House Intel Committee. Sir, good morning to you, and thank you for your time from your home district there in California.
Great to be with you.
You saw the headlines on Barr. What did you think of his second interview now in 2 weeks?
Well, I'm glad he's being out there and also stating fact, which is the Department of Justice is not supposed to be telegraphing whether or not somebody is possibly guilty or not. Right? Either you are or you aren't. Either they're going to prosecute or they're not. And I think saying that the DOJ doesn't operate as some adjunct piece of governing body of the Congress is exactly right, Bill.
Okay, now Rush Limbaugh has a few opinions on this. Just roll this real fast, guys. This from yesterday.
This has always been a political effort to destroy Trump before the election and after. During the transition and after his inauguration. It has always been that. It has always been telegraphed. It's always been there for all of us to see.
If Limbaugh's right, what do House Democrats do then, sir?
Well, I think Rush Limbaugh is right. And I was thinking about this morning, looking at the times that the Steele dossier, so this is the dirt that the Democrats had paid for, they began receiving that information in June of 2016, long before the election, and really a long time before they briefed the president, the new President Trump, on this in January of 17. There were multiple installments of that. There are multiple ways that the FBI, in short order, this is the most powerful law enforcement on earth, agency on earth. How is it that they couldn't figure out whether or not Michael Cohen was in Prague? Carter Page, he had been willing to talk to the FBI. In fact, he sent James Comey a letter in October of 2016. So, month after month after month goes by, the most powerful law enforcement agency on earth, something doesn't add up here, Bill. It just stinks. It really stinks, and I think the American people know it, and I think their gig's up, and the Democrats are in trouble because they perpetuated this hoax on the American people, the Clinton folks, and then the Democrats in Congress. Don't forget, and I'll finish with this, the Democrats opposed us every single time we had to go to try to, whether or not it was to figure out that it was Fusion GPS that wrote the Steele dossier and they were being paid by the Clinton campaign and the Democrats themselves, they opposed that. You remember when we put a memo out to say, look, there's been FISA abuse here that's occurred. They opposed that. They even wrote the court that. So these are the same characters that, quite frankly, are not being held accountable by the press. And I don't mean you specifically, but the press has really let us down here in this country.
Well, there's a federal prosecutor looking at all this right now. I think the one thing that Barr has said consistently is that if you're worried about Russian meddling in our election, you should also be worried about domestic meddling, just to paraphrase the words he is using. Adam Schiff wants Bob Mueller to testify. Here's the latest from the Democratic congressman from your state as well, Adam Schiff.
Now, what makes Bill Barr so dangerous is that it is Bill Barr's view that the president could have shut down the Mueller investigation anytime he wanted because he thought it unfair. That is a prescription for a president who is utterly above the law.
We know that did not happen, but just bring it to present day now. What is Speaker Pelosi's play? If you saw her on Jimmy Kimmel last night, she was pretty fired up.
Yeah, I don't think that she wants to go down the path of impeaching a president, especially since that, this whole obstruction idea, so there's this idea there was no underlying crime, right? So are you really going to go after somebody for obstructing justice when there's no underlying crime? And look, the only time that I'm aware of that this has been done, this is like when, like whoever they've been investigating, they destroyed a murder weapon, or they destroyed tapes, or they did something there really was, and the prosecution believed beyond a reasonable doubt that there really was a crime, and they did something to cover that crime up. In fact, what the president did here is, I always joke, the Comey memos are really defense exhibit A against an obstruction of justice charge, because you have the president of the United States saying, look, Comey, investigate this. Cohen wasn't in Prague. There's no P tape. I didn't have any girlfriends in Russia. I didn't talk to anybody in Russia. That's the president saying this. So how are they really going to get an obstruction of justice charge? The whole thing is asinine from the start. And what they're doing is they just keep digging. That's what the Democrats in Congress keep doing. They keep digging. And if the press would actually tell the truth in this country, I think it would be overwhelming that what Barr's doing to rein this in and actually go after and investigate the investigators. I think you would see 75% of America say, yeah, what happened here is wrong.
Wow.
We shouldn't use the counterintelligence capabilities in this country to target a political campaign.
Barr said again, he used that phrase, don't hang together. Things were not hanging together when he went asking questions. Things were not jiving was the way he phrased it with CBS. Sir, thank you for your time. Devin Nunes there in California. Right.
I personally felt he could have reached a decision, whether it was criminal activity, but he had his reasons for not doing it. When the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, and I felt it was necessary for us as the heads of the department to reach that decision.
Well, Attorney General Bill Barr revealing that the former special counsel Robert Mueller could have made a decision on obstruction of justice himself. But why was the Russia probe so focused on obstruction at all? Joining me now is former DOJ official Robert Driscoll. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So let's begin with these latest comments from Bill Barr. I mean, he's saying that he could have made a decision, Robert Mueller could have. Why did he not?
It's a little bit perplexing because his logic was a little bit circular, in that he said, well, we can't charge the president, so I can't reach a decision. But he made a decision with respect to collusion or conspiracy. And so, I mean, if you follow to his logical conclusion, there's no reason to do the work at all. If you're a special counsel and you can't charge the president and therefore you can't make a decision, it doesn't make a ton of sense. I think he was, striving for some type of fairness to say, like, well, I can't make the decision because if I charged him, he wouldn't be able to respond. But I don't think it's really any better to lay out the facts he did. I think that has the same risk of being unfair as he was worried about. I mean, granted, he was in a tough position in terms of what to do. I'm sure he felt a lot of pressure. But I think the Attorney General had it right in terms of there's nothing stopping him from reaching a conclusion. He certainly could have recommended to the Attorney General and said, we think there's enough here for an obstruction case. But for the OLC opinion, and leave it up to the Attorney General to decide and make the Attorney General pull the trigger.
It seems like people looking from the outside in that would have been the logical thing for him to do, but instead he stopped short, and some alleging that he did that in order to play both sides, because at the very least he could have used the term guilty just once, and he didn't even use guilty one time, and people, of course, comparing that to Ken Starr, who used it 11 times in reference to Bill Clinton.
Yep, a little bit different for Starr, working under a different independent counsel statute, where he was delivering a report to Congress. But I get the point, for sure. And I mean, unfortunately for Bob Mueller, who's got overall a very good reputation in Washington, I mean, I think this whole affair is increasingly coming off as a little bit Comey-esque, if I could coin a phrase. I mean, it's resembling a little bit of the problem that Hillary had leading up to the 2016 campaign, and that, Comey at his press conference where he said, oh, we're not going to charge her, but while I'm here, let me just lay out all these bad things she did. And it's kind of, very similar to that, I think. And I think the Attorney General is doing his best to kind of clean it up, but he made the call. Obviously, Congress can do what it wants to do anyway. I mean, Congress's impeachment ability, it doesn't hinge on Robert Mueller one or the other. They could do it without him. They could do it, with him, regardless of his findings. So, I think the Attorney General is doing his best to kind of bring some clarity to the situation, at least give a a DOJ answer to these questions, which he's done.
You were with the DOJ from 2001
Yep.
to 2003. So just from your perspective, looking in, you mentioned this Comey-esque type behavior from Bob Mueller. You know,
Right.
Bob Mueller was in charge of the FBI from 2001 to 2013. He actually reapplied for that position with the Trump administration, then was turned down, but then, you know, became the special counsel. So do you think that there are, for lack of a better word, shenanigans going on?
I don't. I mean, the reality is there's a statutory bar on Bob Mueller being the FBI director again. He'd already served for 10 years, and that's the limit under the law. So he was statutorily ineligible to do that. And the report, I think, consulted with the ethics people and found that out. So I don't think that's the real problem. The real problem is just, you know, when, prosecutors in general terms either charge someone or shut up. And, you know, granted, it's a little different when it's the president and there's competing pressures. But I think he you know, unfortunately fell victim to the same problem that Comey did. And that he kind of felt, oh, well, this is special and the country needs to hear from me. And, you know, you're always at risk when you do that as a prosecutor of saying, well, I usually follow the rules, but this time I'm going to freelance it. I think that's always a dangerous thing to do.
And at the same time, you know, he's saying the country needs to hear from me, but also saying that the report will speak for itself. So once again, saying, you know, both sides. Thank you so much for joining us, Robert Driscoll. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Have a good day.